Computer Programming for Kids, Step 8. Let the gauge take the stage. All right, so now we have the code in place that will keep track of the score that the user amasses as they go through the 10 questions, racking up points. What now? Now we assign that value to the progress bar. As of now, the progress bar just sits there at the bottom of the form, like a bump on a log. In the newsletter, at this point, you will see a photo of a raccoon sitting on a log. When do we assign the score to the progress bar? The answer is when the user selects the next button after having made the 10th and final selection, and is thus finished. We test for that by adding the following code. You can put it anywhere in the code area of the form1.cs file, any blank part that is. And it shows some code with a method named calculate age and display, and age score multiplied by 5 assigned to the progress bar's value property. Now alter the code behind the click event of the next button code like so. The new code is bolded. And then it shows code for that and what has been changed in the button clicks code, calling that new method, calculate age and display. Let's translate the last bit of code above, starting with if sequence is less than or equal to 9, into plain English. If the value of the sequence variable is now 9 or less, in other words, sequence is between 1 and 9, call the block of code with the name load next block. Otherwise, if the value of the variable named sequence is greater than 9, 10 being the only realistic option as that's as far as we go, call the block of code named calculate age and display. Note, in programming, the symbol, and then it shows a symbol, means less than. Similarly, the symbol, another symbol, means greater than. The pair of parentheses, or since parentheses is the plural form of parenthesis, I guess I should simply say the parentheses are after the names of the blocks of code. Indicates that what precedes it is a named block of code, methods in these cases. The fact that they are empty, there is nothing between the left parentheses and the right parentheses, shows that they are methods that take no parameters or arguments, as some call them. We'll learn more about that later, but for now I'll show you what the examples above might look like if they did have arguments passed to them. Load next batch, left paren, sequence, right paren, is how it would look if the sequence variable was passed to the load next batch method. If we pass the score to the other method, it would look like this. Calculate age and display, left paren, age score, right paren. We don't have to do that in these cases because those variables are global in scope, not local. More on global versus local variables later, too. The part of the code above that looks like this, // sequence is now 10, and so the app has no further questions to load, we're done, is called the comment. By writing 2 /, you tell the compiler, ignore this and what follows on the same line. It's a note to myself. Everything that comes after those 2 /, but on that line only, will be seen by the compiler as a comment, not code to compile and execute. By execute, what is meant is run, not, Note, whenever you want to make your intentions clear, add a comment to remind yourself why you added a certain bit of code, especially if the code you wrote seems a little strange or hard to understand. If you ever write code that other people will read, they will benefit immensely from good comments you add. In fact, the frustration you save may be your own, because even when you look at your own code later, you may not understand what it's doing or why you wrote it in a certain way. Adding comments may remind you, or at least explain to you, why you wrote the code the way you did. Let's try it out. Here's what it looks like when I select all Geezer answers. And then in the newsletter, you'll see a screenshot of the form after all 10 answers have been 10 questions have been answered, selecting the geyser answer each time, and the progress bar is filled all the way out to the right. It's 100% filled. As you can see, progress bar's value is 100 because selecting all geyser answers amounts to 20 points, because 2 times 10 equals 20, 2 for each answer, and there are 10 questions, and 20 times 5 equals 100. If all the whippersnapper questions are selected, the progress bar remains at 0 and has no horizontal green bar at all. I'll show one more. This screenshot is what I saw when I selected choices based on my actual knowledge and preferences. And it shows a screenshot with the progress bar a little past the midway point. So apparently I'm really more Nino-esque in my tastes than geezerish, for what it's worth. Note, we could have avoided multiplying the age score variable by setting the progress bar's maximum property to 20, instead of leaving it at the default 100. But it seems more intuitive to me to have the value of the maximum property be 100, as we probably think in terms of 100% being the uppermost value, not 20. But if you're playing along, feel free to change it if you want. Just remove the times 5 from the code above and change the progress bar's maximum property from 100 to 20. The results will be the same. But what if we wanted to allow the user to take the test again? We could allow this by changing some of the property and variable values back to their initial settings. We could change the code attached to the next button click to this. The new code is bolded. And then the button clicks event handler code is shown. And the new part of it looks for the sequence value being 0, the value of that variable being 0. And if it is, it sets age score back to 0 from whatever it was, and it sets progress bar's value back to 0 from whatever it was. So it's back to not showing any green as you start over again. And at the end of the code, sequence is set to 0. Sequence itself is set to 0. If sequence is 10, that is, and the end has been reached. After adding that code and then clicking the next button again at the end of a full question session, the form again appears as it does when starting the app. This works because after the final selection, at the bottom of the code snippet above, after the calculate age and display method is called, the variable sequence is set back to 0, which changes what happens the next time the next button is clicked. Look at the code at the top and the code snippet directly above, and you'll see that. Since the value of sequence is now 0, the age score value is reset to its starting point of 0, and the progress bar's value also returns to its original value of 0. So when load next batch is called again, in the block of code below, and it shows the part of the code where if sequence is less than equal to 9, then called load next batch, the load next batch code acts the same way as when the user has just started the app and clicked the button for the first time. Specifically, the value of the sequence variable is incremented from 0 to 1, and thus the if sequence equals 1 block of code runs. But wait a minute. Wouldn't it be good to give the user an indication as he answers the questions how far along he is in the process? Otherwise, he might give up after question 9 or earlier because he doesn't necessarily know if there are hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions, or even a Googleplex of questions left. So in the next step, we will give the user some visual feedback as to where they are in the process. We will use the progress bar for this and change the text property of the whippersnapper label while making the other two labels temporarily invisible. See you then and there.